You're listening to The Jeff Zapp Show.
He's not a conspiracy theorist. He's just a patriot, standing for God, family, and country. Now, here's your host, the Zapper.
Hey, it's Monday. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Jeff Zapp Show. I'm your host, the Zapper. It's good to have you here. 6 November 2023. Appreciate you stopping by. Thank you to all new and old listeners alike. This old redhead's going to get it started here on this Monday. Tomorrow is Election Day. 3 years has passed since the November 3rd, 2020 election. What have we learned? Let's talk about it today on the Jeff Zapp Show. That's right. Thanks so much for stopping by. Do me a favor before we get too far into this. If you haven't visited the website, I would appreciate you can go to thejeffzappshow.com. If you're listening on the podcast or out and about, it's Zap with 2 P's, as my friend Big Al says. So thejeffzappshow.com, where you can get links to the podcast, archive streams, and if you have questions, comments, you can always click on a link, get in touch with us, or send me questions, comments, concerns, requests for interviews. Jeff at thejeffzappshow.com is my email address. Well, Halloween's over. How'd that go for everybody? I'm not a big Halloween fan. We didn't even have treaters this year. It ended up raining, which was, I thought it was kind of nice. Usually I'll sit out front when the kids come by in their costumes and get a chance to chat with them and say hello, be neighborly. But I'm always fretting about the end of Halloween or the end of October, which, happy belated birthday to my brother-in-law, Stephen. His birthday's on the 31st. At any rate, usually I start to fret because I know that means it's November and my wife loves to put up the Christmas decorations like almost immediately. You probably feel, maybe some of you feel the same way that I do. Those that have to go up into the attic or wherever you store all of the Christmas decorations and put them up. So I said, honey, if I could just hold you off for another week or so, then we can put them up. She does a phenomenal job. I'm not really bitching about it. I guess more importantly, it's just one of those things is I can't believe how fast this year have gone. It went pretty quickly, and here we are. So as we're turning the corner, as I mentioned in the intro to today's podcast, tomorrow is Election Day, and it's been 3 years since the 2020 election, the presidential election. And we've learned so much, and today's program really is about that. Here we are 3 years later as we look in the rearview mirror. What have we learned? What haven't we learned? I guess is more important to say. So as we go towards Thanksgiving later this month, now those of us that do practice daylight savings times, well, that's ended. Yesterday, I guess, would have been early Sunday morning. We turned back the clock. So we got an extra hour of sleep. I'm sure some of you, like me, it's takes a day or two to kind of adjust to that. But it's getting darker, and we're heading towards fall. A lot of the leaves have fallen. I'm going up to ride motorcycles today in North Carolina, and I was asking my buddy Dino if there were any leaves left on. He said they mostly have fallen. But that's all right. It's nice, beautiful day here in the Low Country. We're going to get out and enjoy the weather. So I want to do a quick broadcast because I promised you that I was going to be doing this a little bit more regularly. And so that's the whole purpose here. I had intended to go live on Friday, but here we are just a little afternoon on Monday, the 6th of November. And so we're headed towards, middle of fall, and then winter will be around the corner. Although I think for some of you up north, already received some snow. So I'm not going to talk about the S word because I don't really want to see any of that stuff unless I'm traveling somewhere that I can do some skiing. So what's going on in your world? What's happening with you all? Do you feel like everything's just hunky-dory? Are you still wondering what's going on in this topsy-turvy world that we live in? Yeah, I feel pretty much the same way. World Series is over, pivoting to basketball and other entertainment and movies and all of this stuff. And here we are. Tomorrow is election day, and so we're wondering, like, what's going to be happening tomorrow. Are there any big elections here locally? Now we've got some mayoral races and probably some city council, town council, wherever you're living, wherever that might be. But more and more information starts to come out. I guess I was so naive, and maybe you were as well. I guess I didn't appreciate how much I have learned when I was writing this script for today. How much I've learned in the past 3 years. Oh my goodness, it's overwhelming. Talk about gullible. I like to think that I'm a wise person, but man, maybe I guess I'm not as smart as I thought I was. And I'm saying that in a very humble way. I'm not trying to be facetious, I guess, but maybe you feel the same way. Hey, we're streaming live today. Primary platform is on Rumble, and I know most of you, because I'm changing up a little bit. I'm not taking any calls today, but I wanted to get a quick broadcast in, and the easiest way for me to do that is on our primary platform, which is Rumble. And you can, if you're watching right now, feel free to throw your comments in the Rumble rants. We're also streaming live on Facebook and YouTube as well. But back to this concept of 3 years now. It's actually been longer than that, because the lead up into the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election, there was all this chaos and havoc, things that were going on. We had Biden versus Trump, and the rallies. Trump was earlier that year. It actually had taken my son and several high schoolers to a large rally up in Charleston, North Charleston, South Carolina, and had a blast. We sat right behind him, and, he was drawing large crowds, and Biden, of course, was pretty much, they say he was campaigning from his basement. No, I'm not going to go there, but he wasn't drawing the crowds that Trump was drawing, and all of a sudden we had this COVID thing pop up, right? The virus. What's Trump call it? China virus? Listen, I'm not going to dig into all the details. You can go back and listen to any of my content, which goes into greater detail on all these topics. But I just kind of wanted to touch on the surface some of the things that maybe we've learned. I know specifically when the counting stopped the night of the election, and we saw a lot of these ballot dumps and point totals or vote totals that spiked up, it was like, question here. I wonder what the heck is going on. And of course, days and weeks ensued, and we watched, something strange was happening. And it's, for those that are listening to this broadcast where maybe you haven't done any research, I'm just going to share some of my own personal insight as it relates to the election, because many of you might be thinking, well, oh my goodness, here's this guy. And it's so easy to label others these days. This guy's an election denier. No, not at all. I would like to think that I just question those. I'm very suspicious, even more so today than I was even 3 years ago, because of some of the things that I've learned. But I know post 2020 election, just within a few days. Now, my wife and I were running a nonprofit organization, a 501c4 at the time, called Engage to Right. It was really a community outreach organization. We had been working pretty diligently with the local GOP, the county GOP here, for many years. And we were kind of in with the crowd, if you will. But boy, we started questioning some of the things that transpired. We were labeled. Just how people tend to knee-jerk reaction these days. If you question anything that the mainstream news is propagating in terms of a narrative, or even within what you thought maybe were some of your friends or the club that you're in, boy, they just looked at you with that raised eyebrow and said, oh, you guys are kooks. You guys are a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Everything is on the up and up. And that's when I knew that something wasn't quite right. But one of our first instances with Engage the Right, we were reached out to by the Stop the Steal people to help lead, I guess, a rally up in Columbia, our state capital, South Carolina. And so we got involved, and I got some video that I was going to show, but nobody wants to see me out in front with a bullhorn trying to lead a bunch of people. some of those things that I don't want to say that's embarrassing looking back on it, but, we thought we knew what we were doing. We wanted to stand for what was right. We just want open, transparent, free, and fair elections in this nation as it should be. But something happened, something transpired that a lot of people were questioning the legitimacy and the outcome of the election. And, of course, leading up to J6 and all that stuff that happened and the insurrection and all the things that were labeled, we're finding out later that things weren't necessarily as they appeared or as it seemed. And I would tell you that those folks that were, I wouldn't say trying to convince us, but to get us involved in the Stop the Steal and later with some of the election integrity groups, come to find out that they didn't really have our best interest at heart, or maybe they were trying to obfuscate, or maybe they were trying to stop or run out the clock some of the things that we were trying to accomplish, which we ended up, and I'll talk about that in a minute, ended up going out on our own to do some of the research, and my wife especially, who really did a tremendous job with her team, doing some investigations on her own. Who could you trust? Who was controlled opposition? What group or groups of people were really there to help and support the efforts to ensure there were transparent elections, and who were the folks that were just a bunch of grifters? We saw podcasters galore pop up, and I guess I'm included in that. But to me, this has never been about trying to make money or become famous. It's more about educating people and sharing some of my experiences along the way, because many of these people that were propped up overnight, the truth movement, the MAGA movement, whatever you want to call it, and I'm trying to be cautious here because there are some people that I think were maybe like myself and maybe like you, gullible, naive, just deceived maybe, or lied to about some of these groups and the folks that wanted to push for some election integrity, or what we coined the phrase, the forensic audits. Remember that? Of course, the Rhino Republicans, the GOP, they weren't going to step up to that. They just going to continue down the road, the old guard, the establishment folks on both sides of the coin, whether it's Democrat or Republicans. Remember, the Democrats had been, I want to say screaming, but they had been chanting together that there was something not quite right with the elections. And now all of a sudden, when they supposedly won, everything was on the up and up. It was the most secure election in the history of the United States. But we saw a lot of anomalies, a lot of irregularities, a lot of questions that we had that we weren't really sure what transpired. So whether it was the Republicans and the Rhinos or the Democrats, they all just kind of seemed to be together, the uniparty. In fact, there was a Time magazine article that really talked about all the stuff going on behind the scenes that they were legally doing to really, say, overturn the election. You can go read it if you don't believe me. There were a lot of different groups that were working together to, I don't want to suggest that they were doing necessarily something always illegal, but there was a push, and especially with COVID, for these drop boxes. Some people talk about the machines. I don't have enough information on that, but I do think there were a lot of nefarious activities that have been shown over the course of the last few years that at least a person with any common sense would say, something's not right here. And we'll get into that here in a little bit. But honestly, so my wife and Engaged to Right, working with her team, they ended up doing, and they had been doing, for example, cleaning up the voter rolls. That was a big concern here in South Carolina, especially because we use what's called the Electronic Registration Information Center. Eric, you've probably heard of that. In the news over the last several months, a lot of states have dropped out or opted out of using that particular thing. I just find that when you see where the money has flowed, people have talked about Mark Zuckerberg, the Zuckerbucks, right? CTCL and others, and him and his wife, some of these actors that were pushing for new types of voter registration and other initiatives because of the pandemic that happened. They fully leveraged or took advantage of those things that maybe they say that the Republicans should have known better. Well, I don't know. Just a lot of crazy stuff was happening, okay? And so my wife decided that it was time to look at some of the voter registration logs, specifically deceased voters that remain on the active voter registration list. And I don't know specifically for your county, state, or wherever you live, but this is one of the things that she took on. So I learned a lot about this through the particular process. Some of the folks that she worked with, and ultimately they found a lot of people that were deceased from her own research, and she was working with the state election commission. I should say communicating with, not working with, but trying to communicate this with the state election commission through the state GOP, which at the time we were somewhat friendly with. I mean, well, we were for a little while until we became the black sheep of the family. More about that here in a little bit. But ultimately, they uncovered a tremendous amount of voters. See, what happens is, you lose your benefits for Social Security pretty quickly after you die. But here in situations like in South Carolina, the voter registration logs, for some reason, we still had deceased voters that had been dead for years that were still on the active voter registration list. And most importantly, what they started to do is look at and work together with some other folks throughout the state in terms of canvassing, going out, knocking on doors and finding out, did this person really vote or didn't they? We were trying to just do our own efforts because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the people that we thought were on our side and talking a big game, they really weren't doing much, and especially those that were pushing for this forensic audit. I think a lot of folks have been tripped up in this iterative loop, unfortunately, because of some of the grifters that we've seen come out of that particular scene, where we infiltrated, if you will, from the opposition or the controlled opposition. I don't know all the answers behind this. I'm so suspicious of most people now, and I don't like to say that I'm paranoid because I'm certainly not, but I question a lot of these people, especially those from like a podcasting, or they have a platform to be able to be propped up. And I don't have to mention names, but think of like the Reawaken American Tour and all the people affiliated, associated with that. And I went to it back when it was in San Antonio. That was, 21, I think, the November of 21. Yeah, it was. And, I had a chance to meet a lot of the people there. And I think, again, I'm careful not to just insinuate that these people are evil or corrupt, because I think a lot of them, like myself, and maybe perhaps you, where you thought these particular people are on the up and up, but maybe they just misled you and me, or maybe we were just deceived, or maybe it was on purpose. I really don't know. But the canvas effort with my wife and her, I'll just say cadre of associates and team members, I think it was 7 or 8 counties where these people that worked together to go out and to canvass, and they found a lot of irregularities. The purpose of this program isn't to get into the details of that. I think there's Laura Shar, I think is the person, EFAC, E-F-A-C, his Election Fraud and Audit Committee. You can go to her website or Telegram channel and find out more information there. I haven't really communicated with a lot of these people just because, as I said, what I found out is some of the people that we had affiliated with, you're familiar with these folks. I mean, I'll just say the big names, the Rudy Giuliani's and the Jenna Ellis and the Traveling Roadshow or the Circus, Sidney Powell and the Kraken, and we're getting all this stuff. And everybody that's, again, primarily been promoted through the Reawaken America Tour. And listen, I think that I'll be the first to admit that there were some of the things that they were saying sounded pretty good, but maybe it was all too good to be true. Were they really getting to the bottom of this? And my concern with all of these activities is here we are 3 years later. Has anything really been resolved? Now, great, some legislation issues have been, legislative issues have changed. Maybe some laws have been changed. Maybe they're a little bit tougher on the books. But at the end of the day, as Trump always talks about, are we in a place to where we can cast a ballot, paper ballot, single day, or are we still migrating to this concept where early voting and ballot boxes or drop boxes are absolutely fine? They should be available. We've got to be a little bit more restrictive, I should say. And this isn't about trying to restrict people to vote, but it's a little bit a kind of a quandary in terms of understanding what's transpired, how can we resolve it, and ultimately, I don't think anything's been resolved. Tomorrow's election day. I'd love to hear from you guys. Are you still voting? Do you have faith in the system? I don't know. You know, it's a hard one for me. I'd like to say that, yeah, everything is fine, but I know that's not the truth. I mean, let's stop it and reflect on the big Arizona audit. What transpired there? I know a lot of money was raised. I know we saw 2,000 Mules, and we saw all these other movies and True the Vote and all these other people. But has anything really transpired? Recently, I think there was, in Connecticut, a video that was released, and they actually, I guess, the judge ruled there was going to be a new election. But I guess I don't personally have faith in the system, because a lot of these things that have transpired since, really, I guess that would have been the night of November 3rd into November 4th, 2020. I just had a lot of questions. How could this happen? How could this continue on? And then you look at the policies of this current presidency, of what the impact on our society, our nation as a whole. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. So I would like to get your opinion on some of these things that have happened. What have you learned? I know primarily, like I said, people that I thought were to be trusted that seem to be morally upright and have integrity. I think they have a different agenda than what mine is, at least, in terms of patriotism and returning this republic back to what the core value of and the foundational principles of a country that is of, by, and for the people, not this bureaucratic mess that we see up on the hill. And I guess that's where I'm at today, is I'm wondering, are we ever going to be able to return to the republic, the restored republic, the way it's supposed to be? Because I have no faith in the government. It's not, those people are in it for themselves. And we see so much propaganda. You know, I like to use the J6 as an insurrection. Now, I had some friends and family, oh my goodness, you support this guy. And that's so, wait a second, before you know, again, jump the gun here on me. Let's turn it back a little bit. Let's reevaluate. I feel like a broken record. Let's rewind here a little bit on the cassette and find out what's really been going on. A lot of things that we thought were in fact truth and were falsehoods, or at least slivers of deceit in with the truth, which again, it's still a lie. I don't care if it's 99% true, but 0.1% of a lie, it's a lie. It's not truth. How about, if you have faith, do you think the 2022 midterms, do you think those were on the up and up? And you go back and listen to my previous spot, my predictions, if you will, on the red wave for that. How about for next year? You know, we're told that everything, polling-wise, now we're starting to see Biden drop like a rock. It's old Trump, man, he's still out there on the tour, man. He's on the campaign trail, and he's doing everything that he can to make sure that, as my earpiece falls out, talking too much or moving too much, he pretty much tells it the way it is. Now, some people will say, you know, he's not the one. We need somebody else. And I got this flyer the other day. This is the most hilarious thing. We've got to elect someone. If you're on the Trump, basically, here's what it said in a nutshell. If you're on the Trump train, this train's not going to make it to the depot. And I looked at it and I said, who the heck is sending this out? You know, I mean, the candidates and for the Republican nomination, we know that there are a lot of, well, you know, establishment types that are in there. Well, Mike Pence, I guess, he dropped out, right? But we've got here in South Carolina, two of our finest, Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, right? They're running. And interestingly enough, this particular piece was founded by the Koch brothers. American Center, I don't know if I wrote it down. The Center for, I don't know, Progressive something. and I saw it and I was like, what in the heck is going on here? But it shouldn't surprise me, and it shouldn't surprise you at this point. They do not like Trump. It's Trump derangement syndrome 2.1 or 2.0 or 3.0, whatever. It keeps coming more and more and more. It's a real syndrome, by the way. It's strange. I just find out that people prefer the decline of America, even if it entails getting Trump at any and all costs, right? Have you noticed that? There are some people you have a conversation, and again, I don't really necessarily think it's about the person that is, quote, out there in the presidential campaign, but the person should have some ethics, some morals, some values, some integrity. They should have a track record in terms of the agenda and the policies that they've enacted to ensure that this nation is better than what it was. Well, that's what the whole concept of MAGA is, right? Make America great again. Or Trump says it was keep America great. Well, we've fallen quite a bit over the past couple years, for sure. And a country that doesn't have a secured border, it's not a country at all. And again, we have this runaway government. We are bankrupt. We continue to print this fiat money. And an autocratic, tyrannical, two-tier justice system that with a bureaucracy that is just a mess. But these people, the TDS, the Trump derangement syndrome, they want to get Trump at any and all costs. You probably have friends or family members like that. We can't have some common ground as it relates to policy and decisions that would make this country a little bit better than it currently is. I don't know. So in the grand scheme of things, the election for next year, I guess we'll have to wait and see. I hate saying that because I feel like we've been waiting and waiting. But again, here we are. 3 years later, we have learned quite a bit. And primarily, I've learned that you can't, and I hate to say this, but it's so true, you pretty much can't trust anybody as it relates to your local governments, the elected officials, anybody that's, in the club. And we've got a long journey ahead of us. Like I say, especially when you find out that this mailer that comes in, they're funded by the Koch brothers. They're trying to push up these folks like DeSantis, which as we get further down the road, we find out more and more information about him. And, these candidates that pop up, I don't know. I think they're all dead in the water. How did old DeSantis turn out? A lot of people thought, he was the best thing since sliced bread. Well, you're finding out more information that he's not what he appears to be. How about the other side? Is Joe Biden really their best hope? Is that what the Democrats really want you to believe? Please, there's got to be something. What about RFK Jr.? Here's the one that's been propped up and maybe to steal some of the votes from Trump. I don't know if that's going to work out for him. I guess the nice thing about the time will tell is it gives us an opportunity to dredge up, to get more information about some of these folks. Again, call me a paranoid schizophrenic. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's a situation where the more we get down the road, we start to appreciate and understand a lot of these people are not who they say they are. So how about you? Love to hear from you. Drop in the comments or send me an email. Say, Jeff, next show, here's what I want you to talk about. And then we'll open up the phone lines the next time. Send me an email, jeff@thejeffzappshow.com. That'd be great. So don't forget, if you are so inclined to get out, and that's your duty, your civil duty to go out and support the local elections, whatever you have on the ballot, and go do what you got to do. But let's be honest about all this. As I said before, a lie, I don't care how many times it's told, it's still a lie. And no matter how many times a regular old guy like me or gal like you or whomever it is questions the legitimacy of our elections, we're always labeled now, and you would have to wonder why this tactic works so well, but we're always labeled that right-wing, what's the term that they use? QAnon conspiracy theorists. I never knew that was such deserving and such a long title as that. But why are these people hard-pressed? Why would there be, a desire to cast a shadow on people like myself. They're just questioning things that clearly, through our own initiatives, and it's unfortunate that we had to do that, but can you trust certain people? And then here's the thing that's interesting. All the work that my wife did and testified a couple times in front of the state house up in Columbia, people, raised the eyebrows, and both sides of the fence, quite honestly, left or right, Democrat or Republican, they just thought, oh my goodness, what is this lady smoking, or what are these people smoking? And these were relevant questions that really have never been answered. And even, like I said, the local Democrat or Republicans, they had their own ideas. So it gets back to this question: is if you decide that what they're spewing is not the truth, and you just want to question it in some manner, and you're not some kook, some wackadoodle, some fruitcake, you just simply have some questions. And my question to you is, have they been resolved? Or are we just a bunch of right-wing conspiracy theorists? At least that's what the lamestream media is going to tell us. They fact-checked all of Trump's claims that the 2020 election was rigged. Remember that? But now we're finding out more information that there's some truth to it. Oh, and all the things that I was searching for fact-checking as it relates to these. They love to say that these debunked lawsuits that were filed, they didn't go anywhere. They failed miserably. A lot of them were never even heard because lack of standing. So you never really had a chance to move these forward. There were some instances that they were thrown out, but there were some cases that were really never heard because they lacked standing. So they keep coming after Trump. I don't know if we're going to make it to 2024. I really don't. I think Tucker Carlson had mentioned something about, why they're so afraid of Trump and the TDS, and it wouldn't be surprising to him, I think is what he said, that somebody took this guy down, And I'm surprised, quite honestly, that nobody has. Well, maybe they have. I don't know. I'm not hoping or suggesting any of that. I'm just saying, knowing how the cabal, the deep state works, is this TDS is real. And anybody out there that has any questions about elections and how they're run, if it's contrary to what's being propagated in mainstream media, you're an election denier, or I'm an election denier. Think about some of the other things. If you question the virus or the alleged treatment protocols, remember that early on? Oh, there was a definite two-camp divide in the nation. Remember the mandates, all types. And the protocols described by the CDC were contrary to some of the scientific community, as well as some of the physicians that went against what was being pushed. It doesn't necessarily mean they were anti-science or anti-vax or whatever you want to, again, label it. We got to be careful of these labels, folks. How about questioning the southern border or not having real immigration policy? Does that mean you're a xenophobe? Of course not. If you try to engage in conversation today with anyone, whether that's CLT, what do they call it, white privilege, the Black Lives Matter, the BLM folks, or any other group, you're labeled racist just for trying to engage somebody in a conversation. So you're shut down immediately. Or how about if you try to question the big news stories, like 9/11? I always like to use that. What if you question anything as it relates to the events leading up to, post 9/11, and most importantly, the weapons of mass destruction, where we had to go to war for 20 plus years. When we went to Afghanistan and Iraq and all that, the neocons that were pushing their, rattling their sabers, pushing the military-industrial complex to get us into foreign wars and campaigns that we should have never gotten into. Well, if you question any of the official narratives, you're a conspiracy theorist, basically. Or how about this? We went from global warming, dude. It's global warming, dude. to climate change and all of the science. And, there are people that say, oh, it's a proven fact. Well, yeah, it's a proven fact that the climate does change. But are we at risk for extinction? How many of those dates have come and gone? Are we getting ready to enter the ice age? Are we going to get ready to see another change here by 2050? I think is the figure that I keep seeing, where we've got to implement all these things. I think it's a bunch of malarkey, honestly. I'm not. Now, please don't call me a climate denier. Again, my views are probably going to be different than you, because it's from a biblical standpoint. I believe God's the one that's created it all. He's the one in charge. He's the only sovereign. I'm not worried about the fact that the pollutants are going to kill us all. Although, again, we should be good stewards of everything within our environment. But not all countries are. I mean, look at what happens over there in some of the China specifically. But you can't just call me a climate denier, because I don't believe that these scientists have our best interests in mind. I think there's certainly an agenda there. I always say, when you follow the money. I mean, maybe you don't follow my particular logic, but anytime that you challenge a narrative, including climate or elections or science, you're castigated. You're relegated to wear the dunce cap in society. It's just the way that it goes. And so I don't think, I'm pessimistic about where we're headed. I really am. Maybe you are too. That doesn't mean I sit around at night twiddling my thumbs going, oh my goodness, the end is near. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. I'm just saying I don't see any of this being fixed. I think the world's going to go to hell, literally in a handbasket, a lot faster than what many people are saying. And I think, I'm not going to breathe a bunch of hopium into you today. I'll give you a biblical viewpoint as to everything that's been transpiring in our world. There is nothing new under the sun. It's still the same old malarkey. And you may say I'm a right-wing evangelical Christian, born-again kook. Okay, well, that's fine. And you can believe that. But do me a favor. Stop and kind of look back just a little bit and put on your thinking cap and start using some of your critical thinking skills and start to recognize that there's always a little bit of deception on both sides of the political or ideological coin. It's not necessarily what you think it is or what I think it is. There's some truth there in the middle. I believe that Jesus is the truth, that really there is absolute truth and it can be known. But there's a lot of things that have transpired, especially when you look at how society shapes and forms opinions and then kind of ushers in this new era. Remember political correctness? I was thinking about this the other day. Maybe I watched something from George Carlin had mentioned something on political correctness. Anyway, and I was thinking about the early days. Remember how the PC culture and how they started to change and infiltrate our ways and ability to communicate with one another. Certain subjects were taboo. And especially as it related to discussions within the public square, which is what this is all, these radical beliefs that, you now hear as kind of the standard, whether it's a woke culture, cancel culture, CRT, equity, inclusiveness, diversity, not to mention your ESG scores, all these new terms and everything that has been kind of thrown upon us. It's like a bucket of cold water when you're in a hot shower, It's like, oh my goodness, how did we get here? Well, it's transpired not just overnight, but through many, many interesting plans and schemes, if you will, over the course of many decades. Now, again, I want to make sure no one misunderstands what I'm saying here. Is I'm not against being a good steward of our environment. I'm not against having open discussions on some of these things. But when it comes to things like such as ESG scores and having a net zero carbon emission footprint by 2050, net zero carbons by 2050, just a quarter of a century away, really? Are we buying this foolishness like we bought into the PC culture, the political correctness? Are we going to be flying around in electric airplanes? How is this stuff going to happen? Does this magically appear overnight where all of a sudden, you've got put all these electric vehicles that are powered by batteries, by the way, which require rare earth metals and other things that, quite honestly, when they expire, let's just say that, it's bad enough for alkaline batteries, but when you have these car batteries, other large storage, I guess, potential energy for electric vehicles and other such, what are you going to have, electric tractor trailers? What's the infrastructure that's going to support all this? I mean, I would love to see more nuclear, but you can't touch that. You know, it's wind and solar, alternative energies, and then, of course, everything's all predicated on electric vehicles as we push forward towards this net zero carbon footprint by the year 2050. I just think, again, it's a bunch of malarkey. But these bureaucrats that are running it, it sounds so great, right? And, you know, when we talk about fossil fuels and being, you know, the evil one, I kind of probably feel fossil fuels probably feels like me as being the right-wing conspiracist or whatever, QAnon, debunked, fill in the blank, election denier, domestic violent extremist, or whatever you want to call it. But no, that's not, I mean, fossil fuels certainly have a purpose. I mean, think of all the plastics and all of the other products that are produced from fossil fuels. I don't necessarily think it's evil, but again, we can be good stewards. And I think a lot of this research and development as it relates to energy production is good stuff. But are we all going to be driving electric vehicles by 2050? I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I doubt it. And I certainly don't see how we're going to eliminate air travel, which, again, it's more like a kerosene if you know that I'm an aerospace guy. But these big, huge turbine fan engines, I don't see them going to be pushing out, you know, some big electric airplanes. I could be wrong. So I think a lot of this has to deal with these folks that have gotten away with these policies and these agendas for so long. Maybe we just all fell asleep at the wheel. Perhaps we've allowed them to push this nonsense on us, just like they did with removing God from everything and pushing these morally decrepit, these value systems into our society through the entertainment industry and the movies and everything else that we're surrounded by today. Denigrate our societal norms, our culture. You know, they keep saying, well, they have to separate church and state, which is a bunch of malarkey. My understanding is that referred to the government not dictating what religion you should practice. It doesn't mean eliminating faith from the public square or the ability for our faith to influence our culture or the decisions that we make, especially if we're a policymaker. We've allowed a small minority of people and policies to silence the majority of hardworking Americans. And this moral decay has eroded the very fabric of our society. And again, it didn't happen overnight. A lot of these things have collectively gained momentum. And here we are today, talking about something that should be simplistic. It's been somewhat complex, is the very elections where supposedly we're electing hardworking officials that are supposed to work for we the people, at least in a republic, not a banana republic. So something has gone awry. How are we going to resolve this? I know for sure that this republic that we're looking at, or this nation, is not the one that our founders intended. And our Constitution can only survive when the people are morally upright. That's right. It can only survive when the people are morally upright. Remember what I mentioned before in some of my other previous broadcasts. I said you can't legislate morality. Sure, you can try, but it never ends well. Listen to what our second president, John Adams, said. He's the one that said it, not me. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Wholly inadequate. So you may think I'm a kook, and you're probably partially right. But the Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. So anyone out there that doesn't believe in God, atheistic or polytheistic, or your faith is such that you believe that it's, if it just feels good, do it. There's no moral absolute. There's no truth. You can do whatever you want. In this postmodern, post-Christian, post-truth society that we live in, this hedonistic society, whatever goes, right? Just do it. Whatever works for you. That doesn't work for the Republic, for the founding, the Constitution. We become morally reprehensible. It's more relevant today than it's ever been because folks who hold these offices in today's government, whether it's a political side or the corporate world, are these men truly men and women of integrity and impeccable character? John Adams said that because power corrupts, society's demands for moral authority and character increase as the importance of the position increases. Because power corrupts, society's demands for moral authority and character increase as the importance of the position increase. Very few, I believe, very few, as more and more comes out with some of these leaders, quote leaders, quote unquote leaders of our society, of our government, we find that they have very little integrity or moral integrity, impeccable character. So I've always said it starts with you and with me. It starts with our families. It starts with our neighbors. It starts with our communities, doing what is right where you are. Because our beliefs, our core values, basically composed or make up who we are, how we view the world, it's heavily influenced by the environment in which we're reared, as well as the indoctrination. And here, I think, is where it really becomes more clear. It's an indoctrination from the earliest of our education, the academic institutions, whether it's the primary, secondary, academic institutions. If I can talk today, it's Monday. We have a hodgepodge of ideas and beliefs that have helped shape this postmodern, this post-Christian culture. It's crazy. And furthermore, here's the thing, I believe, is you look at the deception, the propaganda being leveraged against the average citizen, and especially through things such as social media. It's very difficult to discern because of all of this stuff that's being thrown. What's truth? What's real? What's fake? We succumb, as I started out this broadcast, many of us are maybe gullible, easily distracted, easily convinced that this is the way things really are when they're not. Superstitions, some disinformation or misinformation, they're warped by these propagandists on both sides. It's confusing. You're in an information war. I've said this for a while. You may not believe it, but it's true. I continue to try to speak the best of my ability. I in no way am 100% correct. Neither are you. And that's why I said it's really important to try to decipher what's happening in today's society. The thing is, when you're having a discussion with somebody and they don't agree with your truth, or saying it's my truth, because truth can stand on its own, right? It doesn't need Jeff's opinion. The truth is truth. And so my simple truth is this, is that there is absolute truth, as I said, that God himself is the author of all truth. It all emanates from him. It comes from him. And Jesus is the truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That settles it for me. But how would you feel if many of the, quote, truths that we've come to know as reality, just like we talked about earlier in this segment, were really only half-truths or maybe smidgens of truth wrapped in deceit? Because deception is everywhere. I was doing some research on this whole AI, deepfake stuff, and I came across this article It was in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if it's going to allow me to bring it up because you know how it is. If you've expired all of your free views, if you will. Fake nudes of real students cause an uproar at a New Jersey high school. Now, I wanted to say that it is difficult for those of us that maybe aren't familiar with this. So if you're new to deep fake, what is it? Or artificial intelligence, you know, and the ubiquity of the Internet of Things and technology today, it's very easy to create. You've probably seen a lot of these videos where you start to see a deep fake. So a person like myself, and I could morph into like a Jim Carrey, or I could morph into a Donald Trump or Joe Biden. There's just, and the voice and the imagery, it's a deep fake. And which makes it really difficult to discern what's real and what's fake today. So this particular article in this New Jersey Westfield High School found out boys were sharing nude photos of them in a group chat. They were shocked, and not only because it was invasion of privacy, because the images weren't real. So they were using these cheap artificial intelligence tools. A lot of the images were, you know, obviously they were capturing their faces from the social media presence of these ladies, young ladies, and they were superimposing them on, you know, obviously it wasn't their body. So that's a deep fake here. It was a pornographic related image where they were taking these ladies' images and superimposing them on this stuff. So it caused a big stir. I just wanted to bring that up just because, you know, you never know until it hits home, until you actually see how this is relevant, until you ever question, say, well, that's Tucker Carlson reporting. He said it. A lot of this stuff, and especially in today's news cycle, you know, we pivoted, as I mentioned last time, from Ukraine, and now we're in the Middle East. I say that, again, there are innocent people in the crossfire on both sides of these camps, and how they're created. And you can infer that there are a lot of people that are innocently hurt in the middle, or maimed, or killed, or destroyed because of what's going on. And I think it's a deviant, a very dubious plan that has been ongoing for a long time. And I think when you look at the deep fakes, when you look at some of the other things that we've talked about, what we've learned a tremendous amount within a short period of 3+ years. So here's a couple questions before we leave this broadcast today. Do you believe, now with the time that's passed, that our government, those that are supposed to be serving us, are 100% honest and truthful and doing the best they can to serve the American people? These are just some questions. I want you to think about it. Do you ever have a thought that our government would intentionally mislead us or feed us misinformation? The very thing that they say that you've got to watch out for on social media, dis, or malinformation. Do you think that they participate in that type of propaganda or that type of psychological operation? Well, let's just look at what we talked about earlier, the origins of that virus. We remember that. We talked about some of the efficacy and the treatment of those particular protocols that they're suggesting, whether it was a government agency or maybe it was an alternative, homeopathic or natural therapeutic remedy. How about the elections that we just went over? Do you feel that everything is on the up and up and they're to be trusted, that there's no issues whatsoever? Have they been resolved? Have they actually, have they shored up the issues, or did they just kick the can down the road? How about some of the global warming issues? Are all those real existential threats that we face? Or, again, is it kind of like the deep fake that I was just pointing out? There's some truth to it. Yeah, it's not my body, but that's my face, and it was captured from somewhere else. So are they superimposed? How about the war in Ukraine? Were we told everything, the truth about that? Remember the flag-waving neighbors? And again, I'm not trying to be mean. I use this as a way to get you to think critically sometimes. Some people were out waving, we got to support them and do this. Again, I feel bad for the people that are in the midst of this whether, again, we're talking about Palestine, Israel, Ukrainians, the Russians. There are people that are hurt right in between the crossfire because of how this plays out, and it's sad. How about the way the policy is created and we follow? You might be familiar with the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, NATO, United Nations. How do you feel about them? Do you think they're up? Do you think they really have the global, the world's best interests at heart? How about here in our own United States, back with the creation of the Federal Reserve? Ron Paul used to talk about this, and I kind of really liked listening to him when he was running for president. He talked about auditing the Fed and so forth. But again, our policies here in the United States as it relates, it's not federal, it's not reserve. We've gotten away from, we've got this IRS that seems to be, they do whatever they want. And that comes in with this big government. We talked about programs, DARPA, you're probably familiar with that. Some of their special intelligence communities that within our government, secret programs and special operations that they're conducting on their own people. How about things that you've heard about with the CIA, like Operation Mockingbird, MK Ultra, Operation Paperclip, and others? I think the more that we look at this, we recognize that there's a lot of things that have been transpiring for a very long time that maybe we haven't been given the truth about. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm paranoid that I sit around and think about these things. But again, some of the things I think that we have been told are maybe most of it's truth with a little bit of deceit. How about some of the things that are talked in circles? And are there aliens? These UFOs, or I don't know what they're called now, UAFs or whatever, unidentified extraterrestrials or what have you. What really happened out there? Area 51. What are these secrets? The space program, NASA, they spend billions and billions of dollars and they use CGI for these graphics. And you're telling me that that's what this particular planet looks like from supposed billions of light years away? I think a lot of this stuff, and especially the funding, again, I always say follow the money. What are these folks really up to? And whether it's scientific or medical community and how it's been projected or how it's been conveyed to us, trust the people in the white coats, they know everything, and you're a science denier. Well, God gave us common sense for a reason. Do we not scratch our heads and go, this is a bunch of malarkey? Here's the thing, back to being able to describe pharmaceuticals, where it comes from. Hello? How about Big Pharma? What's their agenda? You've got these former so-called CEOs of Microsoft and other corporations. You can connect the dots in that. They're talking about certain programs like depopulation. But you talk about it, it's, we'd have to get to this one world government, a new world order, what have you. Are these people, do they have your best interests in heart? And we don't even have to go into all the secret societies and all the stuff that I've covered before, because, again, whether it's Freemasonry or the Skull and Bones or the Committee of 300 or Bohemian Grove or Trilateral Commission, CFR, and on. I want to sound like Alex Jones here on InfoWars because, these things are real. They do happen. And I wouldn't be probably, such a conspiracy, quote, theorist if conspiracies didn't happen, but they do. I'm just saying that this war that we're in, and a lot of it is just so psychological, even though it's a spiritual battle, the war that we're in is real. And there are casualties on both sides. And the people that are stuck in the middle, regardless of what your stand on Ukraine or Israel or Palestine or China or, we've got to go into the Russians, the boogeyman. It's been brilliantly used against us as sheep. We really are. We're sheep, folks. We think we're all, bright. I know sometimes I get caught up in the pride. I need to be a little bit more humble. But the reality is we're all sheep because of this two-camp method that I talked about last time that's used to divide and conquer us. Some of you might be suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Some of us might be more like me, that I'm just kind of stuck in the middle trying to figure this out. And some of you are on the other side, the far right of Genghis Khan, think that you've got it all figured out. Where is our humility to come together to view others in the light of what God sees us, is that we're all precious in his sight, and that everyone is unique and everyone has been created in the image of God himself, male and female. Why are we so afraid to speak truth to others? There's got to be some common ground here. We're all flawed. We're all helpless. We're not going to pull ourselves, this tailspin. We're not going to pull out before we hit the ground, folks. And I don't want you to think I'm some pessimist, because I'm not. And I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying here. I might be wrong about some of this, and some of you might be saying, I'm not a sheep, I'm a sheepdog. I get what you're saying, but listen, the older I get, the more I realize I've been led astray. Like I said, maybe gullible, influenced. This information war, it can fool the smartest of the smartest. And even some of those that are truly, truly bright, they can be fooled and manipulated. Listen, the devil, whether you believe that he exists or not, and that's the greatest lie, that he doesn't exist, he is the father of lies. He is the deceiver. And he is wreaking havoc on this world by all his deception. So you might be a sheepdog. You might think that you're a sheepdog, but at the end of the day, the Bible is very clear. We are all like sheep. We've all gone astray. And the older I get, the more that I realize I've got more questions as I get older. I don't have all the answers. So the people that are purporting to have it all squared away, that here's the plan and here's the crystal ball and I'm going to do this, don't buy any real estate from these folks. We live in this very hedonistic Sodom and Gomorrah culture we didn't arrive here overnight. The only hope that we have, the only hope that we'll ever have for this world, is when Jesus comes back to clean up the mess. He's the good shepherd. He's the only one that will shepherd the flock. And unfortunately, the other thing that we have to remember with all this, as I talked about the devil, is he's the great deceiver. He is the father of lies. Is we have to remember that there are those that have not come to the light. They're still in the darkness, and they are blinded. They can't see the truth. And if you're there, I feel for you, because I've been on that side too. I thought I had it all figured out, especially in my mid to late 20s, man. I was so philosophical in life. And then there comes a point. There's a point of repentance. There's a point of accepting that, yes, Jesus is who he claimed to be. I always say that in my program. If you wonder what this is all about, this particular show is all about encouraging you in a way that leads to truth, freedom, and hope, found only in Christ alone. If there's anything that I say in any of my broadcasts, the one most important thing that I like to end is that if you're searching the amazing grace that you're looking for, I once was blind, but now I see. It's all about Jesus. Listen, I've said before, there's no sweat on God's upper brow. All of this craziness that I just went through, whether it's the election or all the other questions that I posed to you, there is answers to these questions. We may never get them in our lifetime. We may never find out the truth of who killed Kennedy, or on and on and on. But I guarantee you there is a day of reckoning coming. And people don't like to hear that. And people don't like to hear that Jesus is the only way to God, because it's so exclusive. And that's true. But the inclusiveness is for all mankind. And because Jesus is the good shepherd, I'm going to read John and then we're out of here. And then I'll see you next week. I'm reading the book of John, chapter 10. Most assuredly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. See, Jesus is the good shepherd. He knows his sheep, and they hear his voice. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and they follow, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. Skipping down to verse 7. Then Jesus said to them again, most assuredly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. I think of Psalm 23 there. John chapter 10, verse 10 here. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. Verse 11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. Verse 14, I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and am known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have which are not of this fold, they also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. Therefore my Father loves me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have the power to lay it down and have the power to take it again. This command I have received by my Father. Jumping down to verse 27. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. That's John chapter 10. If you've wondered, why am I talking about this Jesus? As I talked about truth today, I said Jesus is truth. He is truth. He is the incarnate Word. He came to lay down his life. Nobody takes it from him. He laid it down for you and for me because he is our only hope. I sometimes think, wow, I wish there could be another way, but there is no other way. We live in a fallen, broken world. Everything that you see around us. If you think you're going to figure it out on your own, or you think that you're following somebody that has it all figured out, other than a biblical perspective, which I just presented, Jesus Christ is the good shepherd. He was sent to do the will, the perfect will of the Father. And he did it. He accomplished it at Calvary, on the cross, for you and for me. There's no going back. We're marching to the beat of this time-space continuum that God has created. And at some point, the curtain call is going to happen. And you want to make sure that you know the shepherd, that you were in his flock. You'll know. You'll hear his voice. It's a supernatural thing. It's a transformation that occurs, and it's a radical transformation because, as I've said before, you can only love once you've been loved, and then only to the degree to which you've been loved. Or you can only forgive once you've been forgiven, and then only to the degree to which you've been forgiven. You've been loved and forgiven much because of what Jesus has done for you. There's a God in heaven. It's the truth. It may be hard pill to swallow. Listen to some kooky redhead talk about the subject of elections and what's gone awry in this world, but it's the truth. So I hope you search out to find who this Jesus Christ of Nazareth is. He's the Savior. That's going to wrap it up for me. I'll be back probably next week sometime. Again, if you have questions, concerns, comments, you can always throw them in the comments on any of our live streams, but you can also send me an email, jeff@thejeffzappshow.com. So until the next time, thanks so much for stopping by or listening to this lunch broadcast. And, we'll be back, but probably next Monday or Tuesday. I hope to have Big Al here with me soon. I'm sorry, Al, if you're listening. We haven't connected lately, but we'll have him back in because it certainly makes this hour go a lot faster. Thank you again. We'll see you real soon. Thanks for tuning in. Would you please do me a big favor? Like, subscribe, and share this content with your family and friends. Send your questions, comments, or requests for interviews to info@thejeffzappshow.com. Visit our website at thejeffzappshow.com to sign up for our newsletter, catch up on archive shows, or to link to our social media. See you next time right here on The Jeff